For the benefit of the group, the plan is really to set the discussion topic and the flow. I'm going to ask Mr. R. Srinivas, Advisor, TCP, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, to set the tone for this session. Mr. Srinivas, sir.
Good afternoon, distinguished speakers on the dais, participants of the dais. I will be highlighting some of the efforts, towards the FTTH and what has been the efforts of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs as well as Department of Telecommunications. I will just briefly highlight the policies, related to strengthening the telecom infrastructure. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. In fact, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is responsible for formulating the model building bylaws. These bylaws are essentially model. What we say that these bylaws are for the guidance of the state government, and every state government have got their own, building bylaws, and the model building bylaws have been acting as, guide to all the state governments, and based on that, most of the state governments have come up with their, building bylaws. So, as per the request of, Department of Telecommunication, we have come up with the, an addendum to the model building bylaws 2016, which is in the form of, annexure. We have put in the annexure of the model building bylaws. Model building bylaws are available in the website. Those who are interested, they can always download from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs website. Now, what we have done is, this is provision for in-building solution digital communication infrastructure. And what are the broad contents, The addendum was prepared in consultation of, Broadband India Forum, Department of Telecommunication, Telecommunication Regulatory Authority of India, and Cellular Operators Association of India. And the broad contents are, of course, we have given the introduction of communication system, that how we are actually, progressing in the telecom sector, especially migrating to the 5G infrastructure. Then emerging technologies we have given in the detail. Now, what are the policy efforts? We have, documented certain policies towards the telecommunication sector. Then, of course, what are the in-building and gated building solutions? And you are all aware, while constructing the buildings, there is a process, the builders, they apply for building plan approvals, and the process is still issuance of completion certificate. And most of the cities, we have total number of 7,933 cities and towns, and out of that, almost 2,500 cities and towns have migrated to online building permission system. The best example is Delhi, Mumbai, where they have totally migrated to online building permission system, which not only includes the building plan approvals, but also culminates into the issuance of occupancy cum completion certificate. So, yes, the addendum has been approved by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and in fact, this has been shared with the Department of Telecommunication. After the approval, we have circulated to all the state government and union territories with a request that this addendum have to be incorporated in their respective building bylaws. So that, whenever the telecom operators, they go for, laying the telecommunication cables, they should not face any problem. And of course, at the layout level also, prior approval has to be given to the telecom operators, which we have highlighted in this addendum. And we have also highlighted the role of, resident welfare association, that there should not be any problem while providing access to the telecom cables. Next, please. Oh, yeah. Now, this is, the latest, a committee was constituted for the, to facilitate standard approach for proliferation of dense small cell infrastructure. This was, committee constituted by Department of Telecommunication, wherein a detailed discussion actually took place that how we are going to install the small cell deployment. I mean, that's very much important, which is the latest technology. And from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs point of view, we have provided inputs, especially to the small cell power consideration and different scenarios of small cell deployment or street furniture. I think there are a lot of GIS experts here. In fact, my organization, Town and City Planning Organization, is actually involved in monitoring the progress of GIS-based master plans. And most of the cities have been instructed to prepare master plan totally on the GIS platform. So what could be the role, how we can have an interface once we are going to install the 5G small cell. And it has been clearly mentioned, in one of the document, one of the draft policy, wherein it has been, mentioned, this is draft ROW policy, that for successful pan-India 5G rollout, huge number of poles would be needed to be erected for deployment of small cells. In addition, the existing street furniture would also need to be exploited for deployment of small cells. Here, GIS technology can very well play the role, especially when you are going to install the 5G cell on the poles. The poles need to be, geotagged for, effective monitoring of, the installation of 5G small cell. Now, this is, the draft policy guidelines for right of way in the establishment of telecommunication infrastructure across the country. This has been circulated to all the ministries, and we have already given our comments to this draft. I don't know whether you have gone through the draft guidelines. And as far as Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is concerned, we have commented on the establishment of poles for deployment of small cells, then uses of street furniture for development of small cells, and then mandatory in-building solutions. They have already incorporated, the mandatory in-building solutions in the, the guidelines for 5G small cell infrastructure. So with this, we have also, you can see point number 13, single online portal and deemed approval. That's very much important, when we have totally migrated to, online approvals. So why not, for granting the clearance of RW, why not we need to have a single online portal and deemed approval. So this is brief, affairs of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and what inputs we have given to these policy guidelines. This is the brief. Can you go to the next? Sorry, it's in a habit. Now these are, for today's session, what 5, important questions, could be, asked to the distinguished speakers. I will request the speakers kindly go through this. I will just, say what are the challenges being faced today in smooth, installation of FTTH inside the buildings, and what measures, more could the government take by way of policy and regulatory intervention to facilitate further ease of rolling out FTTH. What are the expectations of, telecom operators? I mean, of course, from the government side, our role is to facilitate, There should not be any constraint, Once you talk about ease of doing business, I think everything has to be online, Those days have gone that when a person, for building plan approvals, he has to go through various departments to obtain the clearances. And in fact, Mumbai and Delhi, they have totally, seamlessly integrated all the NOCs, Typically, you are aware that, prior to obtain the occupancy completion certificate, there are a number of external and internal agencies where you need to obtain no objection certificates. And a lot of efforts, I mean, it took almost 4 to 5 years, to coordinate with various agencies and to ensure, seamless, integration with all the no objection certificate agencies. Now, what could be the learnings which we derive from the international best practices while delivering FTTH? I was, going through the data, I think China now it's ranked first with regard to penetration of the 5G infrastructure. We don't know the data of, USA, how much they have penetrated. I think India, maybe I think the previous speaker in the previous session, he was speaking about Indian context, that India may be ranked second after China with regard to, the installation of 5G infrastructure. Then how to ensure a good QoS in buildings and to sustain it, and what all we can do, I mean, what we feel are the steps that need to be taken by the different, operators. Then how does 5G PON support 5G use cases? Of course, I am not a telecommunication expert. I hope the distinguished speakers will definitely, give their replies on this. And lastly, how would the ROW policy affect the role of FTTH, especially in removing earlier hurdles? In fact, from government side, we definitely would like to know what are the hurdles, what are the, especially once the telecommunication cables are, laid in the group housing societies wherein, RWA might be, charging to the telecommunication operators. So how these hurdles can be removed? I think we will have definitely a very interactive session. I think sometime we should also keep for the participants who can give their views or they can answer. Thank you very much, and I think we should start our session. So I hope you have seen the questions. So first of all, I would like to invite Mr. Sanjeev Bedekar, who is Chief Executive Officer of Space World. I think you should feel free, to answer any of the questions which we have asked. Maybe if you can start.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Mr. Srinivas, and it's really good to see that today this session is chaired by no less than Mahua, and that itself speaks about the importance that government and the department is giving to this particular aspect. Thanks a lot. And hi Dheerajji, we couldn't meet you here, but so good afternoon. So I think the first question is extremely important, that what are the challenges that we face? Maybe I will try to mix up the opportunity and the challenges both, because they always go hand in hand. Today, somehow, FTTX is predominantly considered as a technology to provide broadband or high bandwidth services to the customers. I believe it has a much, much larger role to play, and it can really become the foundation for any telecom inside a building. The first thing is, every building today, new ones especially, and even the older ones, are going through a complete digital transformation. Security cameras are the very basic hygienes nowadays. There are BMS that is getting automated. There are multiple things and multiple aspects that are being brought up. And unfortunately, even the builders and the best of the builders, where the costs are pretty high for these buildings, they are still using pretty old technologies. Most of them are on LAN cables and all that. So this is doing two harms. Number one, we are putting a primitive technology despite the latest one being available. And second, we are choking all the shafts that are available over there. Now multiple operators come in. While we have only 4 mobile operators in the country, but on the fixed line, there are at least 7 to 8 in any area, out of which the 4 are there, but there are a lot of small operators which are there and who play a very important role. For the builders, for the RWAs, again, it becomes a nuisance at times. First during deployment and then during maintenance, because again, the multiple people will keep coming. And last but not the least is the mobile coverage. I believe all the operators are really trying to put their best foot forward to provide in-building coverages or mobile solutions inside the buildings. But somehow in the absence of permissions, in the absence of some apprehensions that the people have, it's very difficult to deploy any type of BTSs. So all these three opportunities which can actually do a lot of good to the people who are staying there, they become actually big challenge. So permissions, permissions to build their networks inside. And this is where we need to come out with some methodologies, and I think it will come out in your next questions as well, wherein there is a possibility and opportunity for neutral operators. Sir, in last 10 years of India's revolution of telecom, the Indus, the American Tower Company, the Tower Visions, and all the tower companies have played a very, very important role. So while operators have struggled hard, have put in a lot of money to provide best coverage, these guys have, now I think it is time to create the second stage of it, second stage of infrastructure provider or neutral service providers who can really play a very important role to provide these infrastructures in the buildings.
Thank you, Bedekar Saab. I mean, you have really raised very vital points, especially, you know, when you mentioned about that still we are insisting on the primitive technologies. I don't know what could be the reason. Is it that cost factor is there where, I mean, you really have to, you know, switch over to the latest technologies perhaps?
Actually, sir, very surprisingly, even cost is not the factor. And we are trying to work with builders to really explain it to them. But maybe there is a requirement of a shared infrastructure that can really be utilized by all.
Correct.
So the cost will go down when it gets shared by everyone. It is as simple as that.
I think, you know, the next comment you have given is that, you know, once you are laying the cables within the, you know, the group housing societies where, you know, the operators really face difficult. Perhaps Cellular Operator Association of India can write to Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, because this, you know, whatever the permissions within the city and in the group housing, you know, premises, I think if you can write, we can definitely send advisories to all the urban development department under whom the urban local bodies and urban development authorities, you know, they come. So, I mean, we can write to the urban development department, and urban development department in turn, they can advise the urban local bodies and urban development authorities. These are the implementing agencies, or these are the implementers which actually grant approvals. So they can write to the, you know, the RWS, and with a request that you kindly allow free access to the, you know, the telecom operators. Now, yeah, permission to build work, I think, in fact, we have, you know, come out with the solution in the IBS, you know, what I was telling about the addendum. But we also have to see that to what extent the state governments have adopted these provisions, because we are monitoring. One of my, you know, mandate is that to ensure that the state government adopt the provisions of the model building bylaws. So we are continuously monitoring. So this is the latest addendum. In fact, government of Andhra Pradesh have already issued the order to incorporate this in their own respective building bylaws. But again, at the same time, maybe after a few months, we need to have some sort of an audit, you know, whether state government through the local bodies and development authorities, actually they are implementing or not. That's what, you know, we'll have to see. I think maybe COI, if they can write to Ministry of Housing, definitely we will look into. Maybe some other questions, you know, if I invite Mr. Dheeraj Sharma, I think he has joined online perhaps. Maybe warm welcome, Dheeraj Saab. So if you could kindly, you know, respond to the questions which we have shown. So definitely it will add a lot of value to our discussions.
So I could remember one of the questions, one was talking about whether the 5G phone or the phone is ready for the 5G. Maybe I understood the question. I don't remember maybe, but I can comment with the other questions also. So on the 5G phone, we have started putting the G phone even for the 4G earlier. And the 5G requires the two changes. One is the G phone has to move to the XGS phone for the 10 simply backward
Thank you, Dheeraj ji. Actually, we were working, we were providing input from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to Department of Telecommunication with regard to the guidelines for 5G small cell. And in fact, we were doing a lot of literature survey, and once we were going through, the US, how USA has rolled out the 5G, infrastructure. And what we came to know that it was more of a federal policy, without taking into consideration the viewpoints of the local, the municipalities of the towns in USA. So there were a lot of resentment, once they started installing the 5G, C. So do you think that any problem the state government will be facing in this regard? Perhaps we need to take into confidence all the implementing agencies, especially the local bodies and the development authorities, and then we should go ahead with the implementation of, or rather installation of 5G small cell infrastructure.
I think we should think as a integrated fencing solution, not
Yeah.
only the fiber access, including it's a power. Because you cannot take the power connection of the electricity board to each and every small cell.
Yes, yes.
Because the density depending on the small cell, there has to be, it cannot be treated as a commercial connection and then so, and the people should be encouraged to do it some centralized like the power coming from the builders or the very tenants. So I think all these things has to be holistically, not only the fiber, the backhaul, the powering, the permissions, and
Yeah.
then take inside the buildings. So
Yes.
and plus, if you see, if you are able to say the platform is available, it can ease out the permission where the operators are going to face the problems. I
Correct.
think it's going to be a very big blessings to the
Of course,
into the proliferation
yes,
of the
yes,
very small cell.
yeah,
Because the 5G is both inside the buildings and at the poles, at the walls. So the
absolutely.
street side furniture, everything we have to leverage. I think all the initiatives which are coming up, good to see this initiative, and I'm sure we are going to see the outcome in coming days.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dheeraj ji. Thank you very much for your insights. I think, sir, I mean, it will require a lot of, coordination between the different agencies. And of course, we'll impress upon the Department of Telecommunication that the guidance on 5G, small cell, it has to be circulated to every, state government, and we will rather facilitate the dissemination of information to all these, implementing agencies. Maybe, I think in the previous session, they were also mentioning about, the skills problems in Northeast states. Very 2 or 3 states have actually, the people who have got the skills. So that also, I think the issue of skills will also be, discussed, I think, the next speaker. May I invite Mr. Rajneesh Taneja, who is the board member of Courses Technologies. May I request you, sir, to kindly give your insights on these questions, sir.
There are two parts of the network. One is inside the building, which we discussed. The other major part is what is outside the building, and which comes under the jurisdiction of various local bodies and authorities like municipal corporations, councils, PWC, and other multiple agencies. Still, after so many years, that regulatory part of ROW permissions is still a nightmare for most of the telecom operators. Like most of the local bodies, they can frame their own policies. They are not bound, as I understand, by the central guidelines. They can pass resolutions and they can frame their own policies. And some of the big corporations are charging exorbitant rates for digging and for carrying out network creation work. Most of the cities, we don't still have a pole policy in place whereby we can place poles for maybe aerial cables or last miles. And ideally, after so many years, there should have been a process in place whereby we have a dig once policy all across the country, whereby we create utility corridors, and each utility is earmarked gas and water and telecom. Presently what is happening is I'll finish my work, tomorrow other agency will start digging. So it not only creates hassles for the common citizens, but also deteriorates the network of be it telecom or gas or water. So as I mentioned in my earlier discussion also that a telecom network which is supposed to be laid for say 20 years, we have to replace every 3-4 years because of this multiple digging part. So this ROW thing has to be addressed on topmost priority. We have been hearing that 2018 we came out with a draft policy for single window thing, but still it is far from being implemented. And unless we have a regulation on pricing and processes, it still is a big issue for all telecom operators.
Rajneesh Taneja ji, you've also, raised very vital points, especially, with regard to the, the local bodies, they have their own policies. They will pass the resolution, and they may not adhere to the guidelines which have been issued by the, the Department of Telecommunication. You have rightly mentioned about the poll policies. That has to be, and that has to be really, we have to work it on. Maybe, a communication to be sent to the Department of Telecommunication, and Ministry of Housing and DOT can together work on the, the poll policy. Now, of course, poll policy, you have mentioned about the dig-one policy, utility corridor. You must have seen GIFT. GIFT is one of the greenfield, the planned township where they already have the utility corridors. Whenever, Government of India or a Ministry of Housing of Urbanized advocates, the development of new township, there are, the 15th Finance Commission, they have advocated that we need to, plan or develop new 8 incubation towns, and an amount of 10,000 crore rupees would be, sanctioned for developing these towns. So definitely your viewpoint, I mean, what you have mentioned about the dig one policy, that has to be, be the integrated part of the, the whatever the master plans or the development plans which we are going to prepare. And I am absolutely sure that the new township, wherever it comes, it will definitely have the, the utility corridor. So that will, to large extent, it will resolve the problem of, the digging, or it could be a shared, I mean, if it is a utility corridor, so all the telecom operators can work on a sharing basis. Definitely. Now, the challenge would be what will happen to our old cities, the brownfield cities, where, how you will keep on seeing, if you take the example of the Mumbai or any million plus cities, they are all, in mode of, the redevelopment. A lot of properties are being redeveloped. So somewhere we also need to have a policy for the brownfield cities once go for, I'm quite surprised that you have mentioned that in spite of, the draft policies has come, and even the previous policies, the single window clearances or the experience has not been too good. So perhaps we again will have to work it on. As far as building plan approvals, we have a good experience where cities have done a lot. But for this, I think we'll have to have a serious discussion with the Department of Telecommunication. Pricing process, I mean, I'm not an expert on this pricing, perhaps. Rajat ji, if you can, highlight some points on that.
I think the pricing is actually something which is definitely needs regulation. There's no question about it. The pricing presently is whoever has the ability to harness the most. And unfortunately, the end customer, their interest is forgotten in the process altogether. So if the municipal corporation happens to be a rich municipal corporation, and there are many examples in the state of Maharashtra, for example, very specifically, Pune is one, where they have extracted an enormous sum of money on a per kilometer basis. And I am given to understand that there is some discussion within the Department of Telecommunications on developing a standard ROW costing, which will then be proposed to be issued across the country. The question then, of course, will be implementation of that. In the same way that the ROW policy or regulations were issued in 2018 and are still to be followed in most states, the same will happen as far as this particular rate is concerned. But at least it will be a beginning.
Thank you, Rajatji, for your...
I must add here, to an extent, this is captured in the new ROW policy, but now the only thing is we need to see how does it get implemented. And there are few states, I understand MP, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, and some of them who have even implemented some of the things. But the real one comes from the richer cities, as Mr. Mukherjee said.
Now,
Maybe Dheeraj has a point of view also on
Dheeraj,
this.
if he can give his suggestions.
No, I think the point is very right. The implementation across the country is critical. And because I think the most critical is I would say the top 10 cities and then followed by the next series of cities. And if the major cities like Pune, Nagpur, Mumbai, and if they're not able to take benefit of that, then I think because here most of the enterprise and money is there, and most challenges are there, and large buildings are there. And other places where it is pretty flat, small cities, the challenge is more on the small side and the side.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dheerajji. If you would like to add.
Just to give you an idea about the pricing part, some of the rich corporations charging as high as 3,000 to 4,000 rupees a meter. So for all practical purposes, this does not make any business sense for a telecom operator to provide a good, robust, reliable network. They'll try to find ways to somehow provide a network, but not what as a citizen I require. The quality and the experience will definitely go down. So, and it has to be fast-tracked, this ROW process, because it is actually impacting the entire nation. And the kind of data requirement we have right now, unless we fast-track it, it's going to be a bottleneck.
Yes, absolutely, it will be a bottleneck, but I would like to share our experience, from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, under the ease of doing business, the World Bank, which used to, publish every year, the rankings, the rankings in construction permit. We had a drastic improvement from 181 in 2041, we reached to, 27, a drastic improvement. But how it was possible, we were continuously coordinating with the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai and Municipal Corporation of Delhi, And it's absolutely not an easy task. It took 4 or 5 years to convince, both the corporations that you should migrate to the online, the approvals, fast-tracking the approvals, It used to take more than 150 days to get a building plan approval. Now, if you see the latest, within 1 week, you can get the building plan approvals. And without visiting the, either the municipal corporation office or the offices which grant, the no objection certificates. So it's not, it requires a lot of persuasion. It required the intervention of secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Virtually, he used to go every month to Mumbai and, in fact, Delhi MCD. And we used to have a lot of discussion with the stakeholders, with the architects and engineers who are actually responsible for preparing the plan. And that too, bringing all the agencies on board, it's not an easy. And you see in the Mumbai, there are a lot of lands under the control of defense. Now, how you are going to integrate the clearances of defense, it's a difficult task, because they will not share the map because of the sensitivity of the installation. So continuing with our discussions, now I would like to invite Mr. Arvind Bali. He is Chief Executive Officer, Telecom Sector Skill Council. I think that's very much important, the skill enhancement. And just a minute, sir. From Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, again, I would like to share that for the first time in the history of budget, Honorable Finance Minister mentioned about the urban sector, the urban planning. And she also mentioned that some of the reforms you'll have to really undertake at the city and the towns level. And we are working on that. And in while undertaking the reforms, the most important is the capacity building. You know, there is a high power committee has been constituted under the Director School of Planning and Architecture. I am the member convener of the. So we will be highlighting what are the capacity gaps, capacity needs, capacity requirement for the professions who are working in the urban sector. So similarly, I will request Arvind Bali kindly highlight what are the the skill, what are the gaps in the skills, and what are the requirements, and can we have a short-term or the long-term plan wherein we can really work for skill enhancement in the telecom sector. Kindly, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and first of all, thanks a lot, BIF, Rajat, for organizing this event, and I got an opportunity to meet so many friends today, so it was really a pleasure. And also, as far as the subject, FTTH is something which is very close to my heart. I remember in 2013-14, that was the time when we had this Punjab circle where we were giving landlines, and we also had our own fiber. And that was a time when most of the companies who had landline licenses, they were fearing that what will happen to our business. And that was a time I remember I made a speech in one of our R&R event, and I gave them an example of Comcast of USA. Like they were also a landline operator, and how big they became in FTTH, and something we should start. So we were a very small player in Punjab, and still, we were probably one of the first to really give FTTH in Punjab. Now, coming to this specific question, which is related to skilling, I personally feel that I think there's a lot of gap and a lot need to be done around skilling. It is something on which I think as far as government is concerned, government is doing so many things. Skill India initiative itself, Prime Minister Modi himself is giving so much of importance. There's a full-fledged ministry. There's a skill council. We have got all the members. We are all the time working on latest curriculums and things like that. But then definitely there are challenges. Now, what is the challenge which I think a lot of you have really talked, and there is historic reason as compared to US as well as Western Europe. India had a very serious difference between them and us, right? In India, it so happened that our telephone density was very low. And suddenly we got cellular, and like everybody moved directly to cellulars, and landline as such was very, very low. So that means copper or fiber going to home was very less. And then, like suddenly we started working on providing fiber to homes. And now, it has become such an important thing, and suddenly I think we all feel that probably, like we are not well prepared, and the kind of work which should have happened has not happened, and a lot of things need to be done around that. And it is really worrying all of them. Now, there's a time, I remember only 2 days back, in one of our community discussion, we were having this call, one of the operators' fiber was down, and a lot of people were saying, you had only one operator's fiber. Why don't you have two operators' fiber? Like we have got with electricity, DG-CIX, we should also have something similar backup plan for connectivity, because you can't live without that. If you're working from home or otherwise, I think you need it all the time. Now, coming to the skill part, the biggest gap what I find is that most of the companies, first of all, I think the very basic difference is all large companies who are really fiber companies or the companies who are providing broadband, they actually get this thing done through third parties. Or you can say they have got their contractors, or they have partners, or agencies. And these companies, they don't put so much of focus on skilling or training. We do approach all the large companies that a lot of skill should be given, a lot of training should be given. But unfortunately, like all they don't come under them directly. And now, we have started requesting, and we have got a big team who is working with industries. We go to them and tell them that ultimately, when even your extended arm or contractor's man is going to a house, they don't see him like a contractor's man. They see it like your man, right? So he should be properly skilled. He should be given all those skills and training. Big gap and understanding, like for example, even when the fiber cuts are there, the way, like we maintain it, ultimately what we are doing is we are spoiling the whole fiber. And another issue which is typical in India is we have most of the discussions around multi-story buildings. But ultimately, except for metros, most of the places you have row houses. And in row houses, like providing fiber is a challenge. And you provide aerial fiber, then it gets broken, and then, repair, technicians are not there. So all those kind of challenges are there. So our request to most of the industries, and we are actually started a big outreach program, whereby one is, we are giving a lot of free content, digital content to companies that at least, make sure that your staff or the people who are doing this job, they should see those videos. At least, they will at least. Yeah, so they should see those videos and at least they know by audio visual you learn very fast, even if we don't want to bring them to the classrooms or something like that. So we have got our own LMS system through which, we try to give a lot of scaling through digital media. We can devise a lot of program. But the thing which I think we all have to understand, and Rajat, I think you know it very well, it is practically very difficult for lowest level of employees to bring in a hotel or some conference room and skill them and train them, or to bring them to the classroom. It costs a lot of money, plus you don't have backup so much, and all the time you're passing through one crisis to another. So the best thing is that we should try to give them online skilling and online certification, and we have got programs through which we can do. Only thing is, I think that message has to reach loud and clear to all the industries, that they should not just leave it on smaller contractors and outsource that, जो जैसे काम कर रहा है वैसे करता रहे. Not the ones, who have just grown from electrician to a fiber expert. I think that approach will not really work in this case.
Thank you, Arvind Baliji. You raised a very points, especially with regard to the technical gaps, and you mentioned that most of the companies actually rely on outsourcing to the third party, the contractors or the partners. But will it not be possible that some sort of a registration to be done for the, the third party or the contractors?
Yeah, actually, that is what is need to be done. The approach which I think most of the companies have to adopt is that even if you have got contractors or sub-vendor, they should be treated like your own employee. You should maintain a database, and that database should be then used. It has started happening. I'm not saying that this is not happening, but we are just able to address bigger ones, able to reach out to some of them. But ultimately, I think if we really want to achieve quality and the best of the quality, then I think it should be done uniformly everywhere. The other thing is, which is also very important, is that it is something which has to be done from the very beginning. Like all our programs, like a lot of youth we are skilling today, even in ITIs and also, in our training institutes, who are trained on that. So if the companies just simply start taking them as a skilled manpower, because the gap is we are skilling people, they don't get the jobs, and those who are getting jobs, they are not taking skilling. And there's a big gap. So as Telecom Sector Skill Council, we are trying to bridge that gap. But I think first of all, if we are able to start hiring these guys who are being skilled, you'll find a big difference.
And so, sir, I suggest, and maybe it's already there, There is a huge scope for certification of this. Like in IP networking, there were always this CCNA. There are so many such courses which always give a lot of comfort to the contractors and all these guys also. Yeah, this guy is trained for this particular thing. And then obviously his opportunity for hiring also gets improved. But if there is some sort of certification methodologies, then that can also be a...
Certification, I think, but I was very glad to know that they have got an online skilling program. And based on, successful completion, I think you can always introduce this. I think you are already doing the certification program. You are already doing the certification program.
Mr. Srinivas, may I
Yeah,
ask?
please, sir.
I just wanted to understand what the view of the speakers is with regard to continuous power supply. I had a very particular query raised by somebody in our housing society. They say that we have generators, but it takes sometimes maybe half a minute or a minute for those generators to power on. In order to prevent a problem, they have UPS for their backup, for their desktops and for their Wi-Fi routers. But what happens is when the power goes off, the signal at the back end goes off as well. So is there any minimum threshold QoS required for uninterrupted power supply for in-building solutions?
Can you?
But I'm a bit surprised because most of the installations on IBS, why just IBS, any BTSs, there is always a battery backup which is available over there. And it is generally in few hours based on what is the condition of power in that area. So normally at least power adds into cost for sure, but then it's a must. Yeah, DG-CIX are slowly going away. One of the agendas of green sites also. But battery is not going away to my mind, and battery is very much there. If you see the modern towers of Jio, who are much more efficient, even they have not taken away the battery out of it. Maybe Dheeraj ji can add into it. So battery very much exists, and that provides, yeah.
Is different, and I think I also suggest to many people like that. What is happening is, in community, we are depending on supply from, let's say, Haryana State Electricity Board, and that trips, say, 4 times, 5 times in a day. And DGs takes around half a minute to start or 1 minute to start. And during this period, your Wi-Fi switch offs, and then you're like, everything restarts, take time. So what I've proposed, and I've done it in my case, and I propose it to many people, is a very small UPS only for your router if you can have. Because most of the time, your phone, your iPad, your computer has got a battery backup. So it'll still be working, right? And that UPS helps you for getting uninterrupted broadband or Wi-Fi.
Yeah, but I was talking about that router in the house is covered, but the connection behind it is what is not covered. So even if the Wi-Fi is on, there is still a signal loss in the line. That is where the problem is. Dheeraj has a point.
Because I think maybe some of the old generation networks are the ones which are where the people are having maybe distributed switches from some of the operator and all. And there maybe if the power goes, maybe their backup is not there and then there is interruption services. But today I would say 90% of the broadband services coming on the fiber, and there the central office or the authorities are having a power backup, and the rest of the only thing is a passive. So if the customer is having a power backup at his own place,
So,
In fact, sir,
is there an opportunity for us to include this as a standard
absolutely.
part from the QoS
No,
side?
but the biggest concern would be what about, we are fortunate enough to stay in million plus cities or the greenfield townships where you may enjoy the uninterrupted power supply, but what about the rural areas? What about the small and medium towns? Now, actually, being working in town and country planning organization, we often get criticized that where is the country, where are the, the plans for the rural areas. So that also we are working on. And in fact, we have prepared the guidelines for preparing a plan for Gram Panchayats. I think one of the most important aspect would be to ensure uninterrupted power supplies for the rural areas. That's what, and we have experience, while teaching, from, home, we have faced that lot of students, either they are staying in the distant Ladakh district or Sikkim or Arunachal Pradesh. There was a lot of, problem of, there was no problem of internet connectivity, there was a problem of power failure. So I think it was a very interesting session. I think we may request participants if they can have certain questions to the distinguished speakers. Maybe, yes.
Thank you. There's a question there. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you are from, that will help us.
Yeah,
And who the question is at. For.
maybe to all, anyone can answer. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Narendra Arora from Vyavi Solutions. So, my question is that in most of such meetings, generally there is a discussion about the challenges of fiber deployment, about right-of-way challenges, but there is little or no discussion about monitoring the optical fiber or how to protect it, right? So generally, there is a lot of time gap between when the fiber is deployed and the activities put on the services, right? In this time, whether this fiber was available or not available, how to ensure the feasibility if I have to turn on a customer within 24 hours. So there is no discussion about such challenges.
Sanjeev, would you like to take that question? And I'm then going to ask Dheeraj to come in also.
Did you want to start?
Dheeraj, you wanted to start?
Yeah, I can start. Niranjan, I think the one you said to some extent you are right, and I think all the operators are working in the direction. So one is, whatever the fibers are on the ground, they are a very, I will say, the golden assets, and they have to be protected and they have to be monitored and managed. So I think from a dark fiber monitoring point of view, I think whatever the deployment was happening earlier, and with the cost optimization happening in this solution, so the dark fiber monitoring is going not only the long distance or the interstate networks, now it is going to even the metro and the access networks also. So it is going further deeper and deeper because of the fiber cost is also becoming high, and everyone wants to safely layer for the fiber. Each and every fiber strand should be put to use or to be monitored, so that whenever there is work, they should be able to use it. That's the, I think, the point number one. And the second thing, from a point of view, the feasibility and where the fiber is there and how they want to use it. And I think everyone is putting and the things into the systems, into the GS-based platform, where everyone knows each and every asset, where this asset is there, how much it utilized, how much to be used, and for which application they are being used. By having a OSS and the fiber-based monitoring solutions, I think that lot of intelligence is being put into place with our entire next general operation, fiber monitoring, GS platforms, and bringing everything put together on the platform. And fiber as a service, fiber as a asset is being monitored and being monetized also to large extent. And with the deep fiber coming for the FTTH, it is becoming even more challenging. And the people are, at least we are trying to put now the protections, not only even the core and backhauls, even to the customer networks also. And the technology is able to allow us with the cost effectiveness and with the customer requiring a reliable services, because there are large number of cuts are there in India. So we cannot protect that part, but we are trying to mitigate that with putting the right technology, the right
Thank you, Dheeraj.
Thank you, Dheeraj.
Sanjeev, your...
I think Mr. Narendra also asked that in such conferences, why that point is not discussed.
Yes.
So I think it was very well addressed by Dheeraj, what do they do? But what happens is generally these conferences are more to give feedbacks to the regulators, to the government agencies, to where they can help us. And I think once a network has been built by any operator, the second part that you are talking about becomes his portfolio, becomes his responsibility. A lot of new technologies are being deployed, as Mr. Dheeraj said. FMS is just the beginning point. A lot of things are being deployed. But at such places, I believe a regulator or a monitoring agency may not be able to help us. It's the operator's problem, it's the IP1's problem, and they have to sort it using best of the technologies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Dheeraj.
Any other question from... Yes, I see two hands. Please introduce yourself and tell us who the question is for.
Hi, my name is Digvijay Pratap Singh. I am from Untitled Broadband. Before come to my question, I want to answer your question which you asked, that why it is like that electricity goes off, but there is power backup in house, but the backend network goes off. So apart from the big organizations, the big ISPs, there are very small ISPs working in local areas who are in partnership with local cable operators, who install the OLTs and giving them the bandwidth. And these are very small operators who do not have such infrastructure that they can install an UPS or something like that, and having a very limited user base, less than 200 sometimes. So that could be a possible cause why when electricity goes off, the backend network goes off. So my question was to Mr. Bali. Mr. Bali, when I started working in telecom fraternity, 64 kbps was broadband, and we were selling at 800 rupees. And now in the organization which I am working currently, we are giving 500 Mbps on the same cost, right? So we have traveled that much distance from 64 kbps to 500 Mbps over the same cost. So affordability is not a question. Demand is not a question, which we have seen in last couple of years. Infrastructure is not a question, because so many government authorities and regulators are coming to help us. The problem is that growing demand requires a growing manpower also. I have worked with skill council also when I was in my previous company. So I worked a lot with skill council, but why these things are not materialized and we're not able to create the pool of manpower as per the demand which is required in the market. Plus, I also wanted to understand why cannot we go a step back and install this into the curriculum of schools and colleges rather than starting after the college, because I passed out in 2006 and moreover the curriculum is the same. It is still not that much industry oriented that actually needs to be done. So I wanted you to understand why there is a gap between that. Thank you.
I think really very good question. First of all, answering your last point, government has come out with new education policy, NEP 20, in which from 9th standard onwards, skill has gone into curriculum. That means the way, like if you remember many years back, PT used to be a compulsory subject, you have to be physical. So now skilling has become a compulsory subject. You have to choose a skill subject. That is something which is happening. There are a lot of new policy changes are coming. I just tell you, this is not something which is widely publicized, but so much of work is happening around scale. Government of India is doing so much work around scale. They want to really change the whole thing, and we all know. I love giving this example. Like there was a time when just if you knew how to speak English or if you knew how to work on computer, you'll get a job. But now everybody knows English and everybody can work on computer. Now getting job, you actually need skill. Plus, if India has to grow, then ultimately we need a lot of skilled manpower. And we also need a lot of skilled manpower to export to other countries. So ultimately, there's a big requirement. Now, for doing that, a lot of work is happening. The point what I was saying was that, unfortunately, I'll say that a lot of things, unless it is mandated by government, right, it doesn't happen. Like sometime industry, they don't feel that as a responsibility that, you know, like we should only take certified people or skilled people, or at least, you know, we should invest into this area, right? All large companies, big companies, you know, I myself was running companies, you know, like our focus is mainly on the employees who are working under my own organization. But in telecom, what is happening is, large organizations have got only 10-20% of the total workforce which is working for them under their own role. Rest 70-80% is all partners, right? And most of their training programs ends within their organization. It doesn't go to the next level. We are trying to bring that focus that please actually start taking ownership there. Please start insisting that, you know, people should be skilled there, certified there, and all that stuff. And gradually it is happening change. We are also doing a lot of work around that. We are going to organizations, we are actually talking to them. Another which good thing is now at least organizations have started realizing that, okay, if we can't use these all funds for ourselves, they're giving a lot of CSR funds to skill councils, that okay, let's overall skill youth. Like it may not be that a telecom company is giving CSR funds to us, and we are skilling youth. It is not that directly they'll work for same industry, but they actually get skilled for some other industry. So many things are happening, and I'm sure you will see a lot of change. One area which will bring biggest changes, like if government mandates, but government doesn't want to mandate only for one reason, because it gives an excuse to the industry that, you know, like now we are not getting, and there's a gap and all that stuff, and that is the reason it is not happening. But otherwise, I think requirement is there, people are understanding it, government is understanding it, industries are realizing it. Another small point, 5G, for example. 5G, you know, like is one area where DOT and MIT, you know, like they are really working very hard. Even before, you know, spectrum being auctioned, our curriculums are ready. We have started looking, and we have started going to the colleges, telling them that, you know, like you start adding these curriculum in their studies. So all that is happening. But unfortunately, you know, a lot of these things are not visible, and I think mass and universe is so large that we are able to address only small fraction or percentage, and that has to change. Thank you.
Just I would like to add, you know, at least I can tell from my profession, urban planning, every 2 to 3 years you have to, you know, change the curriculum. The technology is changing so fast. And for capacity building, you know, I mean, why not we can link the, you know, whatever the training programs or capacity building programs are attended by the telecom official, whether in government sector or private sector, why not it should be linked to the career progression? That's very much important, and we are, you know, seriously thinking about that. It's not that simply you have come and attend the training program and, you know, went away.
Right.
It has to be linked, it has to be properly evaluated that how the training was imparted, what are the major takeaways, and how it can be linked to the career progression. I think that will add a lot of value to our, you know, the skill enhancement.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bhali, I have a point here that feels there is a big gap between the skill which is coming out of the colleges and what is actually required in the industry. And I don't agree that companies are not spending money on training. A lot of money and time is being spent on training. If there is a better synergy between curriculum being prepared and institutions and the industry, I think we can have a better trained people coming out of the institutions. That is my understanding.
Very true. Sir, you had a question for us.
Yes. Okay.
Please
Good
introduce
afternoon.
yourself and tell us who the question is
Yeah,
for.
my name is Manish Agarwal. I work for the Institution of Engineers India, IEI, and I live in Gurgaon. So my question is that actually I have a problem with the FTTH connection. Like I have 6 years back, I got a broadband connection from Airtel, and initially it was a conventional broadband connection. Then later on they upgraded it to V-Fiber, what they called as V-Fiber. That router modem was also upgraded, changed accordingly. And now 2 years back they said that now we are ready with the FTTH. So we are so you can upgrade it to the, you can get it upgraded to FTTH, fiber to the home. So I said, okay, you please come and install it, and I am ready to pay even higher price. But later on then they said that feasibility is not there in your area location, though it's a prime location in Gurgaon. Gurgaon is also a millennium city, and all the services and IT industry is located there. But still they are not able to provide the FTTH in my location. Feasibility, or maybe it's a demand and supply issue. Maybe they feel that it's commercially not viable, not enough demand is there. So in the FTTH now, there are two options, like it can be, OFC can be laid either underground or overground. So in the overground thing, there is problem, like inclement weather conditions or construction activity on the route from the pole to my house. There can be a problem, because I noticed that if there is any construction activity, then it gets the wire gets disturbed by the builders or the contractors. So my question is that actually I believe perhaps nobody from Airtel is there, otherwise any speaker can answer. So why this is happening? And somebody said that row houses and so basically it's a hybrid kind of situation, because mine is a row house, but row house, multi-storied row house.
So if I may interrupt, Mr. Agarwal, thank you. I think you basically are pointing out an area of concern that you have faced yourself. I think this is a problem at this discussion forum, which is a little different, which goes to, are there any specific bylaws maybe? Or is it possible for us to mandate in some form or fashion that such a requirement, everything should be possible? As he's very correctly saying, Mr. Agarwal is correctly pointing out, what are the constraints which prevent me from getting the service? Sanjeev.
So I think Mr. Agarwal is raising a very important point. So whatever we have been talking about, the permissions or the ROWs, and that will happen to the new buildings that you come.
Correct.
But there is a huge, how many new
latent
buildings
demand.
Percentage, if you try to go in percentage, it will be definitely single-digit percentage.
Correct.
What gets added? What happens to the so much of large buildings that exist? Yeah. He talked about V-Fiber. So V-Fiber also giving was 40 Mbps once upon a time, but that was on copper network. Now it has to be upgraded. The customer is wanting, he is ready to pay. But the problem is, okay, what do we do in the brownfield? Because brownfield, in addition to the permissions, which is more difficult, the workability also becomes a problem. So when we make rules about ROW or whatever guidances we want to give, I think brownfield is going to be an extremely important point that needs to be addressed. So while the question may be particularly for an operator, but again that applies everywhere. Brownfield is a big challenge.
And sir, we'll have to really monitor, once we have, in-building solution for telecom infrastructure. Now, once the cities and the states, they adopt, we have to get feedback from the telecom operator. What constraints they, in spite of making the provision in the building boilers, actually what constraints they are going to face, which we would like to know. Then only we can come up with a separate, boilers.
So thank you, Mr. Agarwal, for your feedback. I think it's relevant.
Yeah, somebody was talking about QS, quality standards. So is there any QS for the, like if it is overground, then inclement weather or construction activity disrupts it. But underground is better. There will not be any disruption due to weather or construction activity or due to any other human activity. So it would not be disrupted. But it may be dearer or costlier. Cost may be high in the case of underground OFC laying.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Very valid point. Very valid point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just wanted to mention, this is one of the first, at least this is one of the first hybrid sessions that I am attending. And I am absolutely delighted to say that if you look at the back of the screen, I think Dheeraj, you probably being able to see this more clearly than most of the other people. In the chat box, there are over 90 queries and questions which have been positioned over there. Now, I'm trying to get somebody to send me some of those questions so that we can ask them of the members here, so that the audience out there can benefit from the queries, but I'm still waiting for those questions to come in. So this is one of the challenges of running a hybrid session. All right, here's one question which came in to me at 3:44 p.m. from Mr. S.S. Vas. How to address hanging fiber across streets? These fibers are becoming a threat to the people passing streets, and sometimes these fibers are becoming a reason for accidents. So there are two parts to this question, and I'm going to first ask the implementation side. Dheeraj, over to you first, followed by Rajneesh, and then we'll take the Mr. Srinivas's view. Dheeraj?
So the fiber is as the operator, I think the first choice is always putting the underground. And so if you see all the large part of the networks is underground. But when we go to the fiber to the homes and the areas, the distribution part of the fiber, a lot of overhead fiber or radial fiber is being deployed. And it's not only being deployed, it is being deployed in the US also. While in few countries, I think there is a large part of the distribution in terms of the roads. The only thing you see there, because I think as a practice, there is a intervention and not intervention best practices are there. What should be the height of the cable? What should be the size of the cable? What should be the right accessories? If there is a structured radial cabling is done, there is no danger or there is no security issue, there is no concerns. And in terms of the lighting, in terms of the protection, in terms of the safety becomes present. But when there are a lot of local operators or the local practices that are happening in the areas which are going and putting the cables any more, I think those are the areas those are the concerns area. And I think as best practices, if you push the operators to put the right things in the right way, I think that will create security concerns of the people and not only provide services.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Thank you, Dheeraj. Do you have an additional comments on that, Rajneesh?
This hanging cable issues is primarily because of no standardization and primarily because of the unregulated market of the smaller players. So if this again will fall into the regulatory framework. So once we have a standardization of the policies, we can gradually come out of this issue. Not immediately, but it is a hazard for a citizen. I agree.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the hanging cables, you need to have a policy. And in fact, once we are coming for the utility corridor, you can straight away, finalize the alignment of the telecommunication cables. That's what, I mean, it's easier for the greenfield township. But at the same time, when we go for the brownfield, I mean, the whole cities, there you maybe have, I mean, we have the, the right of way from, the property to property, what we say from the urban planning point of view. So there is a very limited scope, if you have an 18-meter right of way road, where you are going to lay down the cables. So yes, in order to overcome these problems, you can, map the utility corridor. And in fact, if you talk about the 5G small cell, that also, the mapping can be done. Each and every pole, wherever it is going to be installed, it can be mapped, and accordingly we can, monitor the functioning of the 5G small cell.
Okay, so I have another very, very interesting question. I think this is something which needs to be asked. Whenever a customer changes the service provider, the customer needs to purchase a new modem. And this is in a situation where the modem has been supplied by the service provider. Why is there no universal optic fiber modem which works across all service providers? I think this is not a question which is a modem problem. I think this is only a question of ownership of whose modem it was in the first place. So I think that question has been asked and answered for you. There's another question, which is what is the scope for pre-concretization solutions for in-building solutions? Is the cost economics of plug-and-play solutions in India net positive given the higher day zero installation costs? I think this is the distinction that you made between brownfield and greenfield. And, if there is an option for pre-concretization solutions, it's always available. It's just the difference between brownfield and greenfield. So that is just an indication of the kind of questions. I think today has been an extremely interesting session, even if I say so myself. And may I then bring this session to a close, Mr. Srinivas, with your permission. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this wonderful session. Today, I would like just one last thing. May I have the mementos to present to our members. Mr. Srinivas, please. Mr. Rajneesh. Arvind. And before we end, there are my exhibitors at the back, and may I please request the representatives from Lepton, DE-CIX Technologies, PDR, Cyrotech, and Comscope to please come forward. Rajneesh, will you take it for courses? I mean, okay. Okay, great. PDR. Who's the next? Courses, please. Comscope. And last but not the least, oh, there's one more, is there? Who do we have now? Cyro. Cyrotech, come. Lepton? Ah. Lepton. With that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We come to the end of our 4th edition of FTTH India, the summit for 2022. Look forward to seeing you all again at the next session. But in the meantime, thank you for being with us today. Have a very good evening and goodbye.